Today's lesson has to do with complex numbers. I'm not going to read everything, but just so you know, the key point is that I is equal to the square root of -1. And I squared plus 1 equals 0 and is the imaginary unit. Okay. So it says the extended system of numbers called complex number consists of all real numbers and the sum of real numbers and a real number multiples of I. The following are examples of complex numbers. So you have complex number, you have the real part, and then you have the imaginary part. So A plus BI is in standard form. What you can do with complex numbers is you can add and you can subtract, and I'm going to go ahead and give you that first example. So you're going to add the real part. So we have 7 minus 3i plus 4 plus 5i. So the real part is 7 plus 4, which gives you 11. And of course you have negative 3i plus 5i. That gives you 2i. B is a little bit different. We have the minus. So we have 2 minus I. Remember, if you have a negative, you have to distribute the -1. So it's negative 8 minus 3i. And that's a common mistake here. So 2 minus 8 gives you -6. That's the real part. Negative I minus 3i gives you negative 4i. And this is written in standard form. Okay. So once again, we're adding and subtracting complex numbers. There's a real part and then there's an imaginary part. With example 2, we're multiplying complex numbers. We're going to go ahead and apply the FOIL method. So we have 2 times 5, which gives you 10. 2 times I gives you negative 2i. And then 3i times 5 gives you 15i. And then 3i times negative I gives you negative 3i squared. Remember that I squared is equal to -1. So we have 10. We're going to simplify. We're going to add these two. So it's positive 13i minus 3 times -1. So we have 10 plus 13i plus 3. So we want it in standard form, so we have the real part. 10 plus 3 gives you 13 plus 13i. So now we'll be dividing complex numbers, but you need to understand one thing. We have 3 minus I, and the conjugate will be 3 plus I. You will always be multiplying by its conjugate. That's why they have 3 plus I in the denominator and 3 plus I in the numerator. So they multiply 3 minus I and 3 plus I. Whenever you see this, the middle will always cancel. That's why they have 3 squared plus 1 squared. In this case, we have 6 over 10 plus 2 over 10, because 3 squared is 9 plus 1 is 10. So you have 3/5 plus 1/5 I, and that's written in standard form. So let's go ahead and do B. We're going to multiply by the conjugate. So we have 2 plus 3i. 2 plus 3i. Remember that the middle will cancel, but I'm going to work it out. We have 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times, well, let me do this on the side. So we have 2 minus 3i, 2 plus 3i, and I'm going to go ahead and multiply using the FOIL method. 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 3 is 6i, negative 3i times 2 is negative 6i, and then it's minus 9i squared. So you have 4, these cancel like we said earlier, negative 9 times -1, I squared is -1. So you have 4 plus 9, which gives you 13. So our denominator is going to have 13. Now we have to multiply our 2 here in the numerator. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on the side. So we have 5 plus I times 2 plus 3I. So we have 5 times 2 gives you 10. 5 times 3 gives you 15I. And then we have I times 2, which gives you 2I. And then we have plus 3I squared, because I times 3I gives you 3I squared. So we have 5 times 2 is 10. 5 times 3I, it gives you 15I. I times 2 is 2I. I times 3 gives you 3I squared. So we have 10 plus 17I minus 3. So you should have 7 plus 17I in the numerator. We're going to use the quadratic formula to solve this quadratic. We do know that x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4 times a times c divided by 2 times a. So we know that a and b and c are all 1. So that's why you have 1 plus or minus square root of 1. This is b squared minus 4 times 1 times 1. So I'm going to write negative 1 plus or minus square root. You have 1 minus 4 times 1 is 4 divided by 2. So I have negative 1 plus or minus square root. 1 minus 4 gives you negative 3 divided by 2. This right here is imaginary. So it's going to be negative 1 plus or minus square root of negative 1 times the square root of 3 divided by 2. And I did that on purpose because I want to make a point here. That square root of negative 1 is I. So what are the roots? The roots will be imaginary. So it's going to be x equals negative 1 plus or minus I square root of 3 over